He's Connor Rogers, host Matthew Berry's Fantasy Football Happy Hour every Monday through Friday on NBC. Connor, appreciate you coming back on. How you doing, brother?
Thanks for having me, George. Doing great, man.
Hey, man, this fantasy season has been absolutely insane, and we're only 2 weeks in. We're going to get through all the injuries of these backfields and receiving groups. As always, though, I like to start these with the stardom sit-em. Let's start with the guys that may not be the popular start out there in certain leagues, but what are some matchups you're eyeing? And some in favor of some guys you go, they are must-starts if I have them on my roster.
Yeah, these are always kind of the fringy guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
The players that, might not be the biggest names, but can they get you a couple points here or there? I'll even put Zamir White in that bracket right now, right? The Raiders have the Panthers this week. It hasn't been pretty for Zamir White. He gets vultured by Alexander Mattison last week for the touchdown, and he's somebody that typically is not overly involved in the pass game, although he caught 3 passes last week. I think this is just a matchup against Carolina. They're without Derek Brown for the season. If you're going to continue to try trotting Zamir White out there, and if it's your flex or your RB2, I think you could still fire him up this week. I think you're in a situation where, it's just you like the matchup and you think you can kind of get through this scenario where it might not be pretty going after that. And then you look a little deeper down right now. How about Jalen Nailor on Minnesota, right? I mean, this is someone who it looked like there was a lot in front of him going into the season. Obviously, Justin Jefferson commands a lot of targets. People were up in the air on what Sam Darnold would look like in this offense. Jordan Addison is now hurt. TJ Hawkinson's not back yet. You look at Jalen Nailor, he's somebody that you could have picked up on your waiver wire this week after he had 3 catches, 54 yards, and a touchdown last week. He gets a touchdown week 1, and it feels like the volume will only go up for him. So if you're desperate in your flex spot, I feel like Nailor has all of a sudden become a legitimate option for you. And then if you're looking for somebody that might have been slept on in drafts or dropped too early because he simply hasn't played, it feels like everybody forgot about Josh Downs. He's going to make his season debut this week against Chicago. Is it going to be pretty out of the gate? No, because he's coming off a high ankle sprain. You always want to monitor those. But if you want a stash guy that might pay you some dividends down the line, maybe this pass game gets going with Anthony Richardson, especially in a PPR format. Downs is a really effective slot receiver. He's somebody I would roster now and see kind of where things go in the future. And those are the fringy guys. Some guys that I think get elevated compared to where they are because of their circumstance. Brandon Aiyuk has had a really slow start to the year. Deebo Samuel's out right now. When Deebo doesn't play, Aiyuk is consistently one of the best receivers in fantasy those weeks that Deebo doesn't play. If you're worried about Aiyuk because of the holdout, because of everything that happened, the slow start, do not panic. Keep him in your lineup. I know I'm not breaking any crazy news here, but I think he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver this week in fantasy. And then how about Brian Robinson Jr. for the Commanders right now? I mean, this is someone who is kind of going through the gauntlet of great matchups. He has 18 points against the Bucs week 1, almost 15 points against the Giants week 2, and you go, okay, well, we liked those matchups and we like the volume. Well, he's got the Bengals, who, I mean, as Patriots fans saw with Ramondre Stevenson, the Bengals are a team that they can't stop the run right now. The most important thing with Robinson is 16 touches week 1, 20 touches week 2. That's not going to stop with a rookie quarterback. So if you drafted Brian Robinson hoping for some kind of hope at a flex play, I think he's elevated to a sure-cut RB2 status right now and living in your lineup.
Real quick, too, talking about those RB2s before we get the guys to sit. Connor, how do you make a read on this Titans backfield where Pollard looked good? He went against a banged-up Jets run defense. Is that looking like it could be his backfield emerging moving forward? Or is that something still where you look back and you go, I don't know what his role is week to week?
No, I would trust Tony Pollard right now. I think he looks like the guy we all loved in Dallas. You love the volume. 17 carries last week, 16 carries week 1. He looks explosive again. He got the touchdown week 1. He had 5 catches against the Jets. I think this team has kind of told you who they want to be. They want to be a Tony Pollard-led backfield. They showed you that when they paid him, and they've showed you that the first 2 weeks with Tajay Spears being more limited compared to the usage last year with a different coaching staff. So I know it's hard for people to buy back in after he had a down year in Dallas coming off a significant injury the year before, but fire up Pollard for a team that wants to run. They want to keep the ball out of Will Levis's hands, and he's their top running back.
Sorry to spur it on you. I mean, this is how prepared Connor is. Had that stat line of Pollard ready to rip because I told him, dude, we're going to go start, sit, and then we'll go. Hits a curveball, hits it out of the park. All right, for the guys to sit, Connor, who are some matchups you're watching? And again, you said the stardoms is fringe guys you put in, but what it could be a stud or someone that people most likely have in a flex or an RB2 spot that you're going, I would stay away from them because of this matchup.
George, am I allowed to sit an entire offense? I'm out on the Broncos this week. Yeah, the Broncos this week against the Bucs. And I know what some people are thinking. Well, I'm not starting Bo Nix unless I'm in a super flex league anyway, or, I'm not really trusting Bo Nix, so I'm not starting Cortland Sutton anymore. There are a lot of people that expected Javonte Williams to be an RB2 for them this season, and I'm not even starting him in my flex this week. It's against the Bucs. Todd Bowles is going to know how to stop the run. The Broncos, it's almost out of Javante's hands, and you would think Audric Estime going on the IR would actually benefit the touches for Javonte Williams. Jaleel McLaughlin not involved that much last week. It doesn't matter what touches he gets. The offense can't do anything. They can't throw the ball. Teams will sell out against the run. I have no interest in playing Cortland Sutton. I have no interest in playing Javonte Williams. And unfortunately, that's because of the status of their offensive line and their rookie quarterback in Bo Nix. They can't get anything going. I'll give you one, though, that a lot of people are probably fumbling with right now or struggling with right now. I don't know if I could play Jared Goff this week. And Jared Goff is a guy that you look at, the Lions' schedule this year. He's really good indoors traditionally. Yes, they have the Cardinals, which might be a shootout. But the reality is, it just feels like a lot of guys that were ranked below Goff before the season are starting to surpass him in terms of confidence. Baker Mayfield would be in that bracket for me. If Baker Mayfield was probably on everyone's waivers right out of the season and could have still been on your waivers after 2 weeks, I would start Baker Mayfield over Jared Goff right now against those Broncos. So maybe this is a bounce back opportunity for Goff against the Cardinals, but the productivity of passing in this league has not been what we're used to the first 2 weeks of the season, where if your quarterback doesn't run, you need touchdowns. He's not giving you rushing. He never will. He's not giving you touchdowns right now. You got to have a better option out there.
I love that point out about Jared Goff, because in Arizona, it could be indoors, like you said, in a shootout, but still, if you have someone better on your bench, give them the nod. What do you read with this whole quarterback situation? One that jumped out to me is Derek Carr. We've seen a historic offense through 2 weeks. Rashid Shaheed completely unlocked by Clint Kubiak and his arm strength. Is Derek Carr a guy that you look at and go, I could pick him up on waivers, I can get him onto my bench, and that could be someone that I can rely on week to week as the fantasy season goes on?
I would say it's matchup specific, and I know that sounds crazy after they absolutely pummeled the Panthers and then they pummeled the Cowboys. Now, a couple of things with this. One, Clint Kubiak, their offensive coordinator this year, he is for real. He is legit. It wouldn't shock me if he gets a head coaching job after the year. So I don't think this offense is necessarily going to hit any big speed bump anytime soon. Will they slow down? Well, regression is pretty natural for the pace they're on, but they're healthy right now. They could throw the ball down the field because of Shaheed's speed. They have Chris Olave. They haven't even really had to use him that much because they're in a blowout phase all the time. They throw to Alvin Kamara, which you love if you roster Derek Carr, because Derek Carr gets those points rather than constantly handing the ball to Kamara. So I think he's matchup specific. They're at home against the Eagles. The Eagles' pass rush is non-existent right now. They are vulnerable with their older corners, and they're still trying to get some young corners acclimated. I would feel comfortable firing up Derek Carr this week against Philadelphia.
Yeah, biggest red flag I saw from an Eagles defense I thought I'd stay away from. The lack of pass rush, even against a Kirk Cousins. That's something I've been eyeing week to week who they'll be playing. Let's get into some of the backfields that have been banged up. With Isiah Pacheco going down, everyone is saying it's Samaje Perine. Then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he'll eventually come back. Kareem Hunt was signed. There's Carson Steele. How do you navigate this Kansas City backfield if someone put in a lot of fab to get Samaje Perine or might have already had him on who do I start week to week?
Well, if you already did that, I'm sorry. I wouldn't have recommended it to anybody that did. If you put in a small budget and you want to roster one of these players, it's a wait-and-see scenario. And I know people hate hearing that from people that, are supposed to analyze fantasy football. But the reality is, George, what was the beauty of Isiah Pacheco going into the season and why he was a second-round pick is that this was all about Isiah Pacheco and no one else in the Chiefs' offense. They didn't bring back Jerick McKinnon, who's still a free agent, right? They didn't show any interest in giving anyone else the ball. Clyde Edwards-Helaire missed a lot of time this summer. So you looked at the Chiefs' offense, and it was narrow, especially the throwing script of it, that Hollywood Brown is put on IR right away. Xavier Worthy's a rookie. Kelsey's off to a slow start. Nobody predicted that. And Rashee Rice is going to get his. But Pacheco is a volume king and a good player. They don't have the next Isiah Pacheco. They're not a team that they go, okay, next man up gets 14 carries and 5 targets. They're not going to act that way. They'll throw the ball to Samaje Perine. They'll give Carson Steele some carries. And then if they think Kareem Hunt is in shape and ready in a week or 2 weeks, then they'll have Kareem Hunt do a little bit of both. And you're dealing with this three-headed monster that you're probably not getting enough of the pie from anybody on a week-by-week basis. So if you put in a little fab on Perine, that's probably your best move because he can handle all 3 downs. And they might just like Perine enough as a veteran where you're looking at it and going, oh, Carson Steele, undrafted rookie, he fumbled last week. Kareem Hunt off the couch, maybe he's not in shape. It could naturally fall into Perine's hands, but I need to see that before I put him in my lineup unless I'm absolutely desperate. So I would prefer to stay away from this Chiefs backfield unless your league just didn't really bid high on these guys. And the guy I'd go get is P. Ryan.
I love that, pointing it out. Going to another backfield, we see Joe Mixon go down for the Texans, and everyone may be thinking, well, the Texans with all those receivers, why would I want a running back? It's a lot of empty boxes that they'd be facing because of C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins and all of them. But now it comes down to Cam Akers, Dameon Pierce. Who do you see emerging out of those two to fill in while Joe Mixon's on the mend?
Well, I think, one thing we have to keep an eye on going into this is that Pierce is banged up this week right now, and I don't think people were ready for that. So by default of that, it's Cam Akers. But if Pierce was healthy, I'll tell you why I'll still go with Cam Akers. I just think that in Bobby Slowick's zone-heavy scheme, Akers is the better scheme fit. And last year, we dealt with this with Devin Singletary and Dameon Pierce. Everybody was looking around and going, why the hell is Dameon Pierce not playing, not getting the ball? Because Singletary was the better scheme fit. Time and time again, the Texans keep telling you what they think of Dameon Pierce in this offense, not the previous regime that drafted him and he was more effective in. They keep showing you that hand. So if I'm going to start a Texans running back, it's going to be Cam Akers, and you kind of hope he's a guy that falls into the end zone, gets you a touchdown, because the Texans offense is so explosive and they want to run the ball down at the goal line. So I would lean with Akers if I'm going to start one of these guys.
And finally, looking at the Rams receiving group, Connor, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua down, Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson, Jordan Whittington. I'm leaving off one more, Tyler Johnson. There are 4 receivers that could take on a workload, and we know that Sean McVay knows how to get everyone involved. 4 names is a lot. How do you see that being divvied up with Matt Stafford only having 1 football to throw around?
Yeah, this is a really tricky one to figure out, right? Because the good news is Demarcus Robinson has played over 90% of the snaps in both games. So you always want to go through a checklist of these things. You want to know, one, who do I know is going to be on the field? Because I can sit here and tell you, I like Jordan Whittington in college. He kind of fits a McVay, mold of a late pick wide receiver. But I don't know if he's going to be on the field. I don't know if Tutu Atwell is going to be on the field. Demarcus Robinson was on the field with Cooper Kupp already, so he's going to be on the field. So Demarcus Robinson is the guy that you feel the safest about, the highest floor about. I think you can play Demarcus Robinson in your flex and feel okay about it. The guy with a little bit of upside, in my opinion, is probably Tyler Johnson, just because he's flashed early on this season, and it's going to elevate his role because he's a veteran. And then the ultimate stash and wait and see is Whittington, because he's a rookie. He's a good blocker on the outside. I thought he looked good this summer. I know people will look back to last year and be like, hey, they had injuries. Tutu Atwell had a good couple of weeks. I think they just want to play bigger-bodied wide receivers to help block in their run game and throw them the ball in the short area. So Demarcus Robinson, far and away the favorite out of this group if you want to go get somebody, but you're going to pay the most for him. And then I would kind of rank it Tyler Johnson's floor versus Whittington's upside, and then Atwell at the bottom.
Love that point out. We know that you mentioned Jordan Whittington is upside in the run blocking game. That's how Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua got on the field to play for Sean McVay. They take value in that. Jordan Whittington, going back to his Texas days, has been a great run blocker. The best fantasy analyst out there, Connor Rogers. He can talk about it all. Connor, I appreciate you taking the time, my man. And make sure you guys to catch him every Monday through Friday on the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. That's on NBC. It's also on YouTube. Connor, thanks again for taking the time.
Always great talking to you, George. Thanks for having me.